Hi there. Welcome to Taking Stock number 50, would you believe? Now, I'm well aware that the convention has often been that ministers of religion do not speak directly on political matters from the pulpit. Well, this isn't a pulpit, although frankly I'd be amazed if anyone who's heard me preach would be surprised to discover that I'm not now, and have never been, a member of the Conservative and Unionist Party. But nonetheless, I'm absolutely aware that I'm likely to draw some flack for what I'm about to say, because in what I say in public spaces, I can no longer try to distance myself from what's going on in the political world as if I sit in lofty grandeur above the fray. My faith informs what I believe politically, and my faith is informed almost as much by the experiences and wisdom of previous generations as it is by my own lived experience. And like other church leaders, I stand on the shoulders of giants. This week, the words of Pastor Martin Niemöller have been swirling around in my mind like some kind of literary earworm, and I return to them again and again. Some of you will be wondering who this Niemöller is or was. Well, let me tell you. Martin Niemöller was a Lutheran pastor, a near contemporary of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and a co-founder of the anti-Nazi Confessing Church in Germany in 1936. He, like Bonhoeffer, eventually implacably opposed the regime of Hitler and his gang of criminals and psychopaths, but he didn't start out that way. As a politically conservative German who'd served in the Kriegsmarine in the First World War, it should come as no surprise to hear that he was an opponent of the liberal Weimar Republic and actually supported the accession of the Nazis in 1933, thinking it would bring about national revival. Well, that support didn't last long when he realised the anti-Christian nature of Nazi philosophy, policy and actions. But his active resistance didn't begin until after the founding of the Confessing Church in 1936. Unlike Bonhoeffer, Niemöller survived the Second World War, and some years later he wrote this, and I make no apologies for the length of this quotation. He writes, "The persecution of the Jews, the way we treated the occupied countries, or the things in Greece, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia or in Holland that were written in the newspapers. I believe we confessing church Christians have every reason to say, mea culpa, mea culpa. We can talk ourselves out of it with the excuse that it would have cost me my head if I'd spoken out. But we prefer to keep silent. We are certainly not without guilt. And I ask myself again and again, what would have happened if in the year 1933 or 1934, there must have been a possibility. 14,000 Protestant pastors and all Protestant communities in Germany had defended the truth until their deaths. If we'd said back then, it's not right when Hermann Goering simply puts 100,000 communists in the concentration camps in order to let them die. I can imagine that perhaps 30,000 or 40,000 Protestant Christians would have had their heads cut off, but I can also imagine that we would have rescued 30 to 40 million people, because that's what it's cost us to now." Now, Niemöller was not especially prescient. He didn't see the rise of the National Socialist version of fascism, which blighted Germany, anything which was not seen by millions of his countrymen. They saw something evil arising and did nothing. Whether they did or said nothing through fear for their lives or their jobs or for their families, no one can say. Whether they said or did nothing because they felt relief that for the time being it was someone else or some other group which had become the object of violence and hatred and corruption, who knows? In the end, Niemöller and Bonhoeffer as well realised that, in Bonhoeffer's words, not to act is to act. That in the face of wrongdoing, no good person can do nothing and hope to retain any claim to virtue. There's no virtue in doing nothing. Now, it seems that this week the print and broadcast media of various kinds have rediscovered the issue of Brexit, presumably because the British public is tired of day after day coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic to the exclusion of all else. What they have revealed is that Brexit, although it's been off the public menu for discussion, hasn't been off the agendas in the corridors of power in both London and the capital cities of the European Union throughout this entire lockdown period. Now, I spent much of my time in 2018 to 19 poring over learned newspaper articles and watching endless talking heads of various persuasions, mulling over all the various permutations as our own politicians and their European equivalents manoeuvred their way around the issue. And it says much about the debilitating effects of the pandemic on the national psyche, doesn't it? That the halcyon days of the pre-election Brexit debate seem so far away and so long ago that they almost induce nostalgia. But what has exercised the columnists and commentators in the past couple of days is it's been revealed that the government of Boris Johnson has declared its intention to legislate in order to either overturn or at least to swerve the provisions of the very same withdrawal agreement which back in January over 300 of his new intake MPs solemnly trooped like sheep through the Commons lobbies in order to enact. Now, bearing in mind that it's a move which is clearly illegal, it's against the law, national and international, and which has been admitted to be as such on the floor of the House of Commons, it's no wonder that one of the most senior legal officers in the civil service has resigned following the revelation of the government's intention, is it? Another one, by the way. Now, I'm happy to go on record, not only as a Europhile EU supporter, but as a definite non-Tory. So I recognise that for me to criticise this government is neither headline news nor particularly surprising to anyone who's heard me speak politically. However, I want to go on record that whilst I have deeply disagreed with virtually everything the Conservative Party has ever done or ever said on any subject over my entire lifetime, I cannot recall many occasions, or indeed any occasions offhand, when I've doubted the baseline integrity of not just one member of a Tory government, but the whole shooting match. By the way, I have to say, for the sake of balance, that I've been equally as scathing about politicians of all parties recently, including the party of which I am not currently, but have intermittently been a member in the last few years. So what I'm saying about members of the Tory government, I could equally well have been saying about members of the Labour opposition over the last 5 years. And even the fluffy little Liberal Democrats have not been beyond catching the rough edge of my tongue in recent months. I'm also happy to go on record as saying that I am an unabashed pro-European, and that in my view there shouldn't have been a withdrawal agreement of any kind, because in my view we shouldn't have withdrawn from the EU. But whether or not you think the withdrawal agreement was a good thing, or withdrawing was a good thing, no one surely can possibly say that it says good things to the world about our nation's reliability, honesty or integrity if mere months after proclaiming that the agreement is the best foundation for a way forward for future relationships, political and economic, between the United Kingdom and the European Union, the man who proclaimed it loudest and identified his own staggering genius as its progenitor has lined up his government and his party, not just to break that agreement, so much as to smash it to smithereens and to trash our country's reputation abroad as an honest broker. What is our word worth if we break a solemn agreement, binding in international law, whilst the ink on the signatures is barely dry? Now, we the Church, regardless of the risks, must speak out, because the passing of unjust laws and the breaking of international treaties freely entered into is the first, even if you think apparently small, step across the line between probity and piracy. I'm glad to say I'm not alone in this view. I'm supported by the words of senior Tories, John Major, Theresa May and, I can't believe I'm saying this, the late Margaret Thatcher. But even if that were not so, it would still be our duty to speak out, even if we believe that this step from this government may not affect us personally. We cannot remain silent, for that would be to offer tacit support to a government which thinks of nothing but its own short-term gain at the expense of the future well-being of citizens yet unborn. And if not us, who else is to speak out? For as Martin Niemöller also and perhaps more famously said, first they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trades unionists, And I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Stay safe, people.